I was 29 years old. I had 4 kids, a mortgage, and a decision in front of me that scared me to death. I was sitting on a boat at Lake Powell fishing with my dad and asking for his help. My dad didn't give me a lecture. He didn't lay out the pros and cons. He just asked me a question. And that one question reshaped not only how I looked at that decision, but really every decision I've had to make for the last 20 years. Every life has moments that change everything. A phone call, a diagnosis, a decision, a door that opens or a door that closes. These are the moments that matter most. I invite you to be there with me in one of those moments right now. Together, we'll discover the lessons, the resources, and the inspiration you can carry into the moments that matter most in your own life. In this episode of Be There, we're going to be talking about decisions. Not how to weigh decisions, not how to look at the pros and the cons, but really how to make decisions from a completely different place than most people ever do. I'm going to tell you the story of the question my father asked me on that boat. I'm going to show you the difference between deciding from who you've been and deciding from who you're becoming. And by the end of this episode, you'll have a simple practice that you can start to use right now. It's the same practice that I share with every client I work with as a high-performance coach. Let's dive right in. First, I'm going to need to take you back to that boat on Lake Powell because everything I believe about decisions really started there. At 29 years old, I was running a car dealership for my dad, Mike Underwood, and his business partner, a man whose name is Tom Jones. And it wasn't just any car dealership. I was running their most successful, most profitable location. On paper, looking from the outside in, I had made it. I had a stable career, reliable income, and a clear path to do this for the next 20 or 30 years if I really wanted to. In fact, my dad had done exactly that. He'd been with Tom for nearly 30 years. But here's the one thing that I couldn't stop thinking about and I couldn't stop seeing. My dad was a minority partner. He was a great man. He was full of integrity and he was one of the hardest workers that I'd ever known. He had a steady income, he had a good life, and he had some flexibility in his schedule. More than that, he had a good name. What he didn't have was freedom. He didn't have time freedom or location freedom. He certainly didn't have financial freedom. But he was comfortable, and comfortable had become his ceiling. Now, his partner, Tom, was a different story. Tom was a majority owner. He'd been growing the business for over 30 years, and he had become financially free. He flew his own airplane, he traveled, and at least from my point of view, he spent very little time in the office. In fact, he kind of lived the life that you'd picture when you picture a wealthy man. Tom had everything I thought I wanted, and I was standing at a major fork in the road. On one hand was the safe path. Keep working, keep running the dealership, collect a good paycheck, check in and check out for the next 30 years, just like my dad had done. The other path was the one that kept me up at night, that I was excited about. I wanted to own my own dealership, but that meant leaving a very sure thing. It meant taking on real debt. I was going to mortgage my house. It meant betting my family's safety and security on a dream that had no guarantees. My 4 kids, my wife, my mortgage, and everything else that I had at the time was riding on this decision. But something in me knew that I was capable of becoming more than I was. So as I sat there talking to my dad, what he didn't do was tell me what to do. He just asked me a question. He said, "Alan, do you want to be Mike Underwood or Tom Jones in 20 years?" I knew the answer to that question, I think, before he even finished asking it. There really wasn't a question at all. I knew what I wanted. Here I'd spent weeks or months agonizing about the debt, the timing, the risk involved, whether or not it would work or not work. I'd been asking, what was I going to do? What my dad was asking was, who do you want to be? And that was the big shift. My dad wasn't asking me to choose a job, to make a career decision. He wasn't asking me to select a strategy. He was asking me to decide who I wanted to become. And his question made every other question irrelevant or insignificant. Now, what's really interesting about this is my dad wasn't pointing me away from the decisions that he'd made. I think that what he was really doing was inviting me to become the man he already knew I could be, and he knew that I wanted to be. And here's one thing that I've never forgotten about that morning. My dad had a lot to lose by asking me that question. After all, I was running his most profitable location. Me leaving made his job and his life harder. It wasn't just going to hit the financial statement, it could put him at odds with his partners. And I think he already knew what my answer would be. And here's what's amazing, he asked me anyway. I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I've wondered over the years if maybe what my dad was asking me was a decision that he'd quietly been considering all of his life, but one that he never let himself make. And sitting there on that boat, he extended an invitation to me that he'd never given himself. Well, I decided right there on the water that I was going to chart my own course, that I wasn't going to pursue safety or convenience. I was going to make a decision. And 6 months later, I opened a caddy corner for my dad and his partners. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it was easy because it was not easy. I'm not going to tell you that it was fun because initially it wasn't much fun. There were some really hard times, some really hard lessons, and some real challenges that I wasn't sure that we were going to overcome. And for most of the first year, I questioned my own sanity if I'd made the right decision or not. For the next 13 years, I grew that business by $1 million year over year, every year, for 13 years in a row. We got to $16 million in annual sales. We were selling over 100 cars a month. And somewhere along the way, I became the answer to that question that my dad had asked me years before. I was an owner, not an employee. Now, I didn't get there by figuring out what to do or how to do it. I simply got there by deciding who I was going to be. And then every decision after that was made from the vantage point of who I wanted to become, not from what do I want to do. So here's what I've come to understand, and I hope that you take away from my experience. It's what James Clear taught. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Benjamin Hardy wrote the book, Be Your Future Self Now, and he says it even more directly. Your future self is the product of your present decisions. Most people decide from their present self. And our present self makes decisions from fear or from urgency, makes decisions from what's comfortable or convenient and what will not rock the boat. Our present self wants to be safe. Now, we disguise those decisions as being prudent or reasonable or rational, but most of the time, we're just protecting ourselves from change and we're stunting our own growth. The future self makes decisions very differently. Our future self makes decisions from vision, from alignment with a higher purpose, and from the long view. Our future self really just asks one question: what would the version of me who's already living this life do right now? And here's the power of making decisions from your future self. The noise fades, the signal becomes clear, and you stop wrestling with 100 different options. You identify who you want to become, you align yourself with that future person, and you start taking action. And that's exactly what happened to me on that boat. There's a line from Viktor Frankl that I think about often. Viktor wrote this from inside a concentration camp, one of the darkest places that human beings have ever been or could ever go. And he said this, he says, there's a space between stimulus and response. And in that space is our power to choose. I'd like you to think about that for just a moment. Even when everything else had been stripped away from him, he understood something. He understood that the space between what happens to you and what you do about it is where freedom thrives. Most people never even notice the space. Your work and mine is to widen that space, to expand our freedom. Tony Robbins says it in this way: it is in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped, not in your moments of intention, not in the moments of planning, in the moments of actual deciding. I love Jim Rohn, and he used to say, you'll either suffer the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Both have weight, but one weighs ounces and the other weighs tons. Anne Frank, from a hiding room during one of the worst chapters in human history, wrote this: first we make our choices, and then our choices make us. We don't become someone new by hoping. We become someone new by deciding, one choice at a time. If you want to start making decisions today, here's where you can begin. It's a simple process. Write down 5 sentences, and they'll all start the exact same way with the words, I choose. Pick 5 different areas of your life: faith, family, fitness, finances, leadership, health, wealth. It really doesn't matter. What matters is, where do you want to make improvements? Write down, I choose, and the simple decision that you'll make today that will make improvement in that area of your life. And then read them every morning this week. Read them out loud, not just in your head. Really read them out loud. Because here's what happens and why that's important. Every time you read them, every time you say them, and every time you act on them, you are casting a vote. You're casting a vote for the version of you that's already living the life you say that you want. When you string enough of those votes together, you don't just get a better week, you decide your destiny. So I want to leave you exactly where my dad left me. There's a version of you 20 years from now who is the result of the decisions that you're making right now, the decisions that you'll make today, the decisions that you'll make this week. What is one decision that you know I'm already talking about, something you've been wrestling with, something that's felt heavy or difficult? I just want to ask you a question, not what are you going to do? Who are you going to decide to be? I invite you to sit in the place of the version of you 20 years from now and look back on the decision you're making right now. and then cast the first vote for that person. And one more thing I'd like to add. My dad didn't make my decision for me. He just made sure that I wasn't making the decision alone. My dad could see what I couldn't see. And he asked me one question that changed everything. And that's what a coach does. That's what the right community does. If you're standing at a fork in the road like I was 20 years ago, and you don't want to face it alone, that's the work that I do. You can connect with me at thealanunderwood.com and let's start the conversation. Whatever you're facing right now, whatever decisions seem daunting, you don't have to face them alone. Be present, be powerful, and be there. I'm Alan Underwood. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.